That's where my imposter syndrome hits the most, is because which is good, right? You should always try to hang out with people that are making you better and moving good. I would probably have a bigger problem if I was hanging out in those social media groups and posting my snapshots and getting 1,000 likes than, I'm better off to be in something like LPW with that tier set. But that's where it really hits.
One of my favorite sayings is if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Hey everyone, I'm Matt Payne, and this is episode 464 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen. Before we dive in, I want to say a genuine thank you to the Patreon supporters who are collectively propping up this podcast. This show exists because individuals choose to support thoughtful, long-form conversations about photography, creativity, and the long game. I don't take that lightly. My guest today is Jeffrey Tadlock. We talk about making meaningful photographs in places that aren't considered iconic, coming back to photography later in life, imposter syndrome, and what it really takes to build a sustainable, creative ecosystem. Let's dive into my conversation with Jeffrey Tadlock. Jeffrey Tadlock, it's awesome to have you on the podcast.
Hello, Matt. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and for people who aren't watching on video, it's like my twin.
It's very uncanny with the black t-shirts and tattoos and nearly bald heads.
We didn't plan that, but it worked pretty good.
Yes, it did.
That's awesome, man. Well, so Jeffrey, I've been a huge fan of what you got going on, your approach to photography, just your personality, and like we've gotten to know each other over on the Discord channel for landscape photographers worldwide, and I'm really excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, definitely excited to be here. I'm really looking forward to it. I've been listening to this podcast for, I've lost count of how long I've been listening to the podcast. So it's super honor to be here and doing this interview. So I'm really looking forward to it. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, of course, man. So for people who aren't familiar with you and your photography, tell us a little bit about yourself and how the heck you got into landscape photography.
Yep. So I'm Jeffrey Tadlock, and I live in Ohio, Central Ohio, the Columbus area. I have a family. Wife and 2 kids. Both of the kids are in college now, so that's super expensive and a lot of fun. Let's see. One of the little known things about me is I do actually still have a day job, which not a lot of people know because that's not really the persona I put out there. But landscape photography, a lot of it is a side hustle. I call it my early retirement plan if I figure out how to make all the pieces line up correctly. And got into landscape photography just from lots of hiking and backpacking in my more college days. Did lots of backpacking in the Grand Canyon, lots of hiking. I had a very influential uncle who got me into some really cool places and just sort of really expanded my horizons with what you could do outdoors. And around the same time, I used to shoot film cameras. And so I used to do a lot of film photography back then. I started a lot of BMX freestyle, pipes, skateboarding competitions, things like that. And so it's something I always sort of documented, and then the two just sort of blended together, where it was a great way to document some of those trips, getting out and hiking and backpacking and seeing seeing nature. And it just sort of evolved from there, but it's sort of stuck with me, and it's been a wonderful creative outlet for me, to sort of relax and do my thing.
Yeah, and you've got a super cool YouTube channel where you just talk about stuff that's interesting to you and you're not trying to like appease the algorithm gods. And I'm super grateful that you did like a really awesome book review video a couple of years ago, included the NLPA books in there. And again, like you didn't even ask us about that. You're like, I'm just going to talk about how photography books can be a valuable thing to use in growing as a photographer. So I thought that was really cool, man.
Yep. Yeah, I like the YouTube channel is great because it just affords an opportunity to sort of talk about things that interest me. And, there's certain videos I'll do that, if I'm feeling down, I'll try to trigger an algorithm to get some views. But I also think it's super important to talk about what's important, and I think so much is not the gear that's important. I'm not against talking about gear on the channel because I think there's people new to landscape photography that they're interested in it and they're curious about it. But I always try, even in those videos, to say, do what feels right to you. New gear is not as important as getting out there and practicing. And, you can sit in your house and watch video after video after video, and you're not going to improve unless you go out and do it. So I always try to push that message, whatever I'm talking about, whether it's how to do some technique or about this camera or that camera, that, this is all great and it's good information, but get out there and practice and do it. So I try to treat the YouTube channel as, and a platform to talk about landscape photography in general. And sometimes it's about how to consume photography books and what's interesting and how to, deliberately consume content like that. And sometimes it's about some camera that I've recently picked up or been using for quite a while and have some real in the field thoughts and opinions about the camera.
No, you're doing a great job. So just wanted to give you a shout out for that right there.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So let's talk about your photography. I know you mentioned you live in Ohio. It's
Yes.
not exactly what most people would probably envision as being the mecca of landscape photography. What is it like trying to develop as a landscape photographer in the Midwest?
So I definitely think it comes with it. I definitely think it comes with its challenges being in the Midwest. I'm lucky enough that Central Ohio, the Columbus metro area, actually has a lot of metro parks. So where I live, I'm actually only like 10, 15 minutes from a fairly decent metro park. There's a nice little trail that's not one of the typical gravel multi-use trails, but it's a little bit more interesting and it follows the river. So you're able to get the season changes and things like that. Intent on things you can find scenes to photograph. Certainly not these grand vistas or, grand scenic landscapes or anything like that. But there's definitely an opportunity to practice without having to travel super far. And then within an hour of me, there's a place called Hocking Hills, which is actually a very popular area for Midwesterners. It pulls in like 1 million or 2 million people a year in visitation. Like it's like this mini Smoky Mountains thing, except without the mountains. It's more sandstone gorges and waterfalls and things like that. But that's about an hour away from me. And while the popular sites there can get really busy in the summer, it's surrounded by forest land. And once you sort of learn the off the beaten path places to go, there's a lot of opportunity to do that. It's probably one of the big reasons why I love to photograph waterfalls, because it is a predominant feature in that area. But it gives me woodlands to practice with and sandstone gorges. And it's still a wonderful opportunity to sort of watch how the light works, how it moves, and sort of work on your technique and build those foundations. So despite being in Ohio, which is, somewhat difficult, you got to make the most of what you have. And I think there are plenty of opportunities, even locally, to practice that landscape photography, even in the Midwest.
Yeah, and in some ways you have an advantage over me because you're near all those population centers. There's probably lots of people nearby that want to learn photography, want to learn how to take images like you're capturing in that place. And so
Yes.
you have a wider net you can cast in terms of getting those people to come learn from you. Whereas I'm in the town of 20,000 people and I got to get everyone to come to where I am, which is completely different, right?
Right. Yeah. It does work. Not only has Ohio got a big population, but, East Coast in general, and that Hocking Hills area, that's actually where I started doing my landscape photography workshops. Was I would do 1-day workshops in that area. And I continue to do those today, even though I've started moving into bigger national parks and multi-day workshops and the bigger experience. But my Hocking Hills workshops are still great because it lets me cast that wider net. And it gives people, I find people sort of trial me out by coming to do essentially a lower cost, 1-day, less commitment workshop. And there's lots of Airbnbs and places to stay. So it's easy to take care of that. A lot of people will come with their family and then they'll come for the 1 day with me and then they'll hang out for a long weekend with their family or something. But I've had so many people come to my 1-day workshops and either become great sources of referrals, or they've signed up and continued on to do one of my multi-day workshops in West Virginia or the Smoky Mountains or something like that. So yeah, being in a population area like that, there's so many people I can reach that's within, a 3-hour radius, 2-hour radius of Hocking Hills gets me. I've not done the population count, but it's a lot of people. So it does make it a little easier, I think, to have a new crop of people to bring through.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting business model in terms of using those 1-day workshops that are more local to you, mostly as a practice for you to grow as a teacher, to get a wider array of people interested in what you're doing. And then you can market to those people later on when you have something that's a little bit higher ticket value. That's something I wish we did a little bit more of for Muse workshops. So I think it's a great idea. How have you thought about like the pricing structure? I mean, not to like give away trade secrets, but I feel like that's in some ways you probably find with just like breaking even on your time because you're just growing your network.
Right. So my 1 days I think are pretty reasonably priced. I've gradually increased them over the years, just because once I reached the point where I could sell them out, then I bump the price up a little bit because might as well get what I can. But they are pretty affordable. I mean, I'll be pretty transparent because you can look it up on my website. But
Sure.
I'm like $185 a day for my Hocking Hills trip, and that starts at like 7 a.m. in the morning, and we go to about late afternoon, and we do a box lunch during that, and we visit 2 waterfalls in the morning, get the little lunch. We talk about photography at lunch. There's a picnic shelter we get, and we talk about that. It can be super casual. It can be a moment for people to dive in on something we couldn't really cover in the field. Or I always like to take a midway point of any workshop and be like, how are things going? Are we covering what you wanted to hear? Because I've still got time to course correct, right? Like if someone's like,
Right.
well, I thought you were going to talk about this, but you haven't yet. I've still got half a day left. Let's fix that. So I use that middle of the day piece for that. And in the latter half of the day, usually it's more people get to practice what we've learned, and I'm readily available for questions, but I can sort of, run sweep and, hey, we missed talking about this. You really wanted to hear about focus stacking, and maybe we didn't cover it in depth, or we were too quick on it in the morning. Here's a place we're going to work through this with you to do that. But like I said, I think it's worked really well for my workshop business. And like you said, when I first got into this, a multi-day workshop was intimidating.
Definitely.
If you don't know what you're doing going into it, suddenly you're with these people for multiple days, and you realize either your instruction style is not good or people aren't getting it. Whereas the 1 day workshops were just a great way to break into it and get some practice and make sure I covered things that people wanted to hear, learning how to talk at different levels, because you know this. Sometimes you get some relatively new photographers, beginner photographers that are still learning the exposure triangle, to advanced photographers who sometimes just want to bounce ideas off of you, or sometimes they have more in-depth questions. But I'm sure you found that with your workshop experience, I would expect.
Yeah, I'm super thankful that I was able to do some like smaller one-on-one things with people earlier on in my career, because when you've got a group of, 7 or 8 people and a co-instructor, and you're doing it for 10 days at a time, it can be, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like 1 day, much lower risk. If you make a huge mistake, not a big deal. You can course correct, like you said. And it's a great way to get you familiar with the work and get a newer audience familiar with going on workshops. And then when you announce something later that's bigger, you got this huge customer base that you can tap into. So I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah, it's been working out well. I've been happy with the approach, and it's the biggest reason I keep doing them, because they aren't the larger moneymaker now, but it's such a great way to get new people into like the whole workshop environment.
Yeah. I mean, in business world, we call it a loss leader, right?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk more about your approach to photography, being in the Midwest. I know you do trips to like Death Valley and all over the West, as most people try to do. Do you feel like working in less iconic landscapes like you do helps or hurts when you eventually photograph those big destination locations?
So it's sort of a mixed bag. I'm a big one for practice locally. I've done videos on that topic and stuff, because there's so many techniques you can practice locally. It doesn't matter what you're taking a picture of to practice exposure bracketing or focus stacking. They may not go into the portfolio, of course, but you're able to practice those techniques. So from that standpoint, the local aspect, I think, can help you establish those fundamentals in your photography so that you're ready when you go to some of these big places, these iconics, the, scenes out there but the landscapes across the U.S. are so varied. The desert Southwest, I mean, I photograph we have a lot of trees, it's waterfalls, and then I go to Death Valley, and it's just this massive space, right? Like massive space. And even as a person that has lived in the desert Southwest for a while in Tucson, it's still just such a different landscape that where I think the penalty comes is, and we'll keep Death Valley as the reference. My first time to Death Valley, I was overwhelmed. I semi knew what to expect, but coming from this local Midwestern landscape to Death Valley with not only grand landscapes, but the Badlands and then the sand dunes and then the textures and then Badwater Basin. And then I almost, when I came back from that trip, felt like I'd missed the objective on some of the places. Like I'd look at my dune photos and I'm like, I don't think I knew what I was supposed to be doing there. I got dune photos, but it's like, then I see other people that have done it before. And it's like, I think I missed the point. And so I think that's where the catch comes is you get used to photographing in your little area. When you get put in these iconic places, which tend to be like jaw-dropping, stunning places, you can become very overwhelmed. So I think that's the downside is if you don't, your first trip to some of these iconic places is just so different that it can be difficult, which is one of the big reasons I like to repeat visit places. I always do better on second visits because I've seen it. I've got that initial overwhelm over, or I've got my stamp collecting over if I happen to know what I'm looking for. Your classic Zabriskie Point pictures, I've got those now so I can focus on other things when I'm out there. But that's what I find challenging with being Midwestern based and then going to large iconic locations.
Yeah, I was curious for you the way you think about your photography, because I'm always kind of split in my thinking between going wide in terms of like wanting to photograph everywhere in the world versus like getting really narrow and just like super focused, like double down niche. Like you could be like the Ohio badass, right?
Right.
And there's pros and cons to both approaches in terms of like seeing really cool places, but then on the other hand, like you're known as the guy for that place. And so how have you balanced those two dichotomies for your approach?
I struggle with that. I hesitate to niche down too much in Ohio, though I do have a little bit of a niche in Hocking Hills, though as I've started traveling and doing workshops in other places, some of that's faded off. It's just hard to balance because for a while I would post a lot of waterfall photos from Hocking Hills, which are popular because it's where people go to vacation. So even if they're just seeing them on social media, it's popular with them. But as I started doing workshops in other areas, my time there's a limited amount of time. So my frequent visits to Hocking Hills, I still get down there relatively frequently, but not as much as I was. So it's tough. It's tough to balance. And then even on the broader scope, I still try to limit myself to certain areas to be good at, I'll say. I tend to do West Virginia. I feel like I really enjoy that, and I know how to photograph it really well, and I enjoy having that sort of expertise, right? Weather can change, seasons can change, light can change, and because I've visited so often, I can roll with the punches super easily on a workshop, or if I'm just out there myself, knowing where to go, when to go, and how to do it, which has value from a workshop perspective. So I still feel like I'm niched down, but not strictly to Ohio. But I agree with you. I mean, you travel all over. How do you deal with that? I mean, you've got wonderful environment practically in your backyard, but then with your workshops, you're going everywhere. So how have you worked to balance that with your photography?
Yeah, I'm same as you. It's not easy in some ways. It's like I have a love-hate relationship with it because on one hand, I'm getting to go to these amazing places and see them for the first time and experience them and try to apply my skills and knowledge in terms of interpreting it through the lens and making interesting images that are personally different, hopefully. And I've definitely kind of lost some of my niching down that I've done here in Colorado in terms of being a little bit more known for Colorado landscapes. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so fierce in protecting my time of photographing fall color here every year, because it's like, it's my way of like keeping that stranglehold on, and it's not even like a competition thing. It's more of like I have such a deep personal connection to this place and I don't want to lose that. So they're constantly at odds for me, and I'm just glad to hear I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I totally feel that same way. The Hocking Hills that used to be, that's where I went every time. I'd be there twice a month easily. But as I started to branch out, it's more like once a quarter I get down there, or I really have to consciously make the time to go do some more exploring. Because it's like anything, once you learn a little bit about an area, you realize how much more there is there. But I agree. It's definitely a struggle.
I do think from a commercial viability perspective, it probably makes more sense to go deeper than wider, unless you're able to constantly attract a following to go to those places with you, because it's really difficult to do all of those places well enough in order to have indexable, searchable, commercially viable work that attracts to people that are looking for it. And like I've slowly grown a nice, Death Valley portfolio, Utah portfolio, but like it's not even close to Colorado. But I'm spending more time in those places. And so it just becomes a matter of you only have so much time on this earth, right? And so how do you choose to spend it?
Yep, for sure. I definitely have those same struggles.
Yeah. So when you introduced yourself, you talked about having some really formative experiences with the camera, bottom of the Grand Canyon, top of Long's Peak here in Colorado. How did those early experiences shape the way that you see landscapes today?
Really, a lot of those experiences, I think, were almost more just landscapes and outdoors in general, as much as photography, anything. Though it does lend itself to I always say the camera is a key, and it opens doors, to experiences and exploration and even connections. But those early days, it did a couple things. It let me realize just how diverse the landscapes in the U.S. are, right? Because I was born and raised in Ohio, and I lived in the desert Southwest for a while. But similar to when you're photographing these scenes, when you see the Rocky Mountains for the first time, it's like stunning to a little Midwesterner like me, because it's just, what is this? Because we've all seen the Smoky Mountains out here because it's our family vacations, but those are pretty tame mountains compared to like what the Rockies look like when you're driving in on 70 through Colorado, right?
I was going to say they're cute hills.
I know. I was going to say, I tried to talk fast enough to not let you bash the Smokies, but so there's that element of just, that's like that. The whole Rockies landscape is just so amazing and different than what I see every day. And then you take the Grand Canyon, which is almost like a complete opposite of an inversion of deep canyons and slot canyons and difficult trails. And, the temperature, once you're in the canyon can be crazy hot. So I think it just, both of those trips and both of those outings and other explorations just really let me see how much diversity in landscapes there are within the United States. I'm the first to say I really have not traveled outside of the U.S. beyond Canada, and I'm very content to just continue to explore the U.S. just because there's even landscapes that I still haven't seen that I know are completely different than what I've seen between like the Rockies and the other, the Grand Canyon and things like that. I think it was, I had a camera with me on both those trips. I always tended to carry a camera, and at the time it was a little more documentation of the events than it was landscape photography. But it just, I don't know, the two blended together just really well as I've continued to do it. And it's sort of like where the passion of being outdoors and nature mingled with the camera on top of that. So, but that's what those trips really did. And it's a little bit of a testament to just what I can do and where I can get and the value of getting off the beaten path. I think that'd probably be the other thing that those trips did. So many people, and you see it all the time. You see it in Death Valley. You see it in the Grand Canyon. People roll up, hit the overlook, tons of crowds. They see this, they check their box, and they're off to the next place, right? But by doing those hikes into the canyon and, hiking in the Rockies and to something like Long's Peak, once you get 5 minutes down the trail, things start to become peaceful and quiet, and you start to get this sense of ruggedness, and you just really start to feel more in tune with nature. It's really hard to feel in tune with the Grand Canyon when you're standing at Mather Point on the railing with like 150 of your best friends, right? But if you just go a little way down the trail or a little bit off the beaten path, it's suddenly a whole different experience, and you get to experience that landscape on a whole different level. So it's really just this conglomeration of things. I think those experiences with the camera became formative to how I pursue photography and getting outdoors these days.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to what we were talking about earlier in terms of going deep versus wide. Like you could easily, in a 10-day span, hit like all the Southwest National Parks pretty well. Like you could do Grand Canyon, Zion, Bryce, Capitol Reef, like all of those, plus probably go over to Death Valley. You could probably hit all those in 10 days-ish, or even faster if you just like breeze through. And cool, but like really did you get to immerse yourself in that place? Like and I see people making, I don't mean to call it a mistake, but I kind of think it's a mistake of like, you make a plan to go to Death Valley, let's say, and you've got a week, and you set aside like one day for every single place you want to visit. I kind of feel like it would be better to just pick 2 places and split your time in half. And then really immerse yourself in those 2 places, get to know them a lot more intimately, explore a little bit off the beaten path like you were describing. And I think what you'll find from that type of approach is you'll have a deeper connection with the place. Your photographs are going to be better. You're going to find stuff that's a little bit more personally impactful. And I just think it's going to be a better experience overall. I'm curious what are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. I much prefer a very loose, flexible schedule when I go visit places, and I'm very content to just sit and enjoy. Even on this most recent trip to Death Valley, hiked up into this one area that was new to me, and I started the typical, I'm taking pictures and stuff. And I finally was like, I'm just going to sit and enjoy this for a minute. Like, because when you're thinking with the camera, it's different. And just put the camera down. I literally sat down, cameras somewhere, wasn't with me, and just sat there for like 20 minutes, just letting the air hit me in the face and looking around and the whole bit. And I think if you schedule yourself, boom, 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 even a day to a place, you just find yourself rushing through versus feeling like you can take that time to sit and just take it in. Like, you don't have to get the camera out. And I think, like you said, if you do that, when you do pick up the camera, you're probably going to connect with something better than if you're just immediately start with the camera and going, or even just the pressure of feeling like I can only stay here for an hour. I got to go somewhere else to be to the next spot. Pressure just, it cramps my creative style. I know that. So I totally relate to, I would rather spend lots of time in one particular place than a checklist of things that I have to go from point A to point B. And never mind if the light's different every day, right? Like, I've been to Badwater Basin many times, and sometimes sunsets are, that's a clear blue sky. I'll find something, but it's not great. And then other times it's amazing. And if you're following some strict schedule, you could potentially miss those times. But if you can revisit, really spend the time there, you eventually get that this is it. This is a truly awesome moment, which then comes through in the photography that you're doing at the time. So yeah, I definitely agree that exploring places on a slower pace is very valuable, and not just for the photography, but just as a person, just enjoying the process of being outdoors in nature.
Yeah, I agree. So I know you, like 6 months ago, you started a podcast with Michael Rung called Shutter Nonsense, and
Yes.
I'm one of your Patreon supporters. And I
Yes,
I just listened to your, yeah, no worries. I listened to your bonus episode yesterday. If I remember correctly, I heard you say that, because I know the Artist Point Drive, Artist Palette.
Yes.
And you parked your car at the road where the road is dead end, and you just hiked straight up the road?
No.
Is that what I
So the Artist Drive was completely mud covered when I was out there, and I saw it from the entrance and the exit. But I went up Desolation Canyon and went up to the dry waterfalls and all the way up to where the canyon sort of pops up. Well, when you get up there, you actually see the backside of Artist Palette, and you could see the drive going through there, and it was completely mud covered, even all the way up to where the parking area was for Artist Palette on Artist Drive. But that's where I went to get that third view of Artist Drive, was up through the Desolation Canyon area.
Yeah, I think I drove by Artist Palette Road like 6 times a couple of weeks ago, and it was I was like, that's going to be closed for a while.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I told because I was doing a workshop out there too, and I told the people I said, see that road? I said, that's actually a paved road. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, that's actually a paved road. But yeah, all 3 vantage points I saw, the entrance and exit, which were readily available. And then from the Desolation Canyon viewpoint, it's like, it was even mud covered up there.
Amazing. That's cool.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say shifting gears just for you, Michael Rung.
He loves it when you do that.
But shifting gears. So you took a long break from photography during your corporate career and your family years. What changed when you came back to photography later in life?
So when I left photography, a lot of it was film based, and then we did the early, I dabbled in the early days of digital. Remember the Sony cameras, the floppy disks, the Sony Mavicas and stuff like
Gosh.
that? Yeah.
Yes.
Wasn't doing landscape photography with it, but it was doing I did a lot of off-roading, and so you'd use some digital cameras back then. But then I took the big break. So when I left, digital was just starting to come alive. I think a lot of the professionals at the time were still shooting film majority, but people were starting to dabble into the digital DSLRs and such. But when I came back, one, just the technology is crazy with how good it is these days with the megapixels and autofocus systems and dynamic range and all of that. So the technology, of course, advanced, and it's like undoubtable that digital photography is amazing from that standpoint. I think the other thing that really changed is just the number of photographers and the people. It's such a crowded space right now. The early days, film, I don't know. It seemed like it was one of those things you had to sort of learn. Not everybody had the patience to do it. And there was a little bit more, you had to understand film speeds and, you had to know shutter speed and aperture to the point that you knew what it was right for the scene because you weren't going to see it until you got the film developed. Then when you come back, it's like between phones and everybody using their phones for photos and just the caliber of cameras and the entry point, I just feel like there was so many more photographers, which is fine, but it just felt like a much more crowded space than it used to be.
Is that good or bad?
I think it's a little of both, right? Like, it's a little of both. I think it's great that people want to take pictures. I think creativity is good. From a business standpoint, it's sort of good, right? Like workshops, you get beginner photographers and there's almost a steady crop of people that are going to be reaching a point in their photography, and that sort of churns over. So if you've got all these people doing photography, there's always that cycling base. But, all this, everyone taking photos with their phones, it desensitizes you a bit to what's out there. So it's a little harder to find good photography, I think, quality photography. There's a lot of people posting images that, if we've been doing this for a while, it's like, they get great Facebook likes and stuff, but it's like, okay, that's that, they're just not good photos though. So you sort of have to weed through some of that. So I think it's a mixed bag. It's got its pros and cons. What do you think? Smiling.
You just struck a nerve because that's I try not to let it bother me, but like that whole thing you just described about social media just drives me absolutely crazy in terms of dude, I belong to a lot of Colorado Facebook groups, and inevitably I'll get like 4 or 5 notifications a day just from like a couple of them, like, oh, look at these new photos in here. And it's always like just like someone was like in the middle of the street with their cell phone and they took a snapshot of, it's not even a good composition. It's like of some mining town, a good light, just like everything's wrong with it.
Yep.
And it's got like 1,000 likes and you're just like, yep. and then I'll post like something that I think is very high quality, like from the top of a mountain at sunrise with insane clouds and like something that 99% of people will never see in their lifetime, and it gets like 6 likes and you're just like, what am I doing wrong?
Yep. Yes, for sure. I'm in similar groups and areas, and I know exactly what you're saying. You'll see an iPhone photo of something, crooked horizon, a little bit of motion blur because they didn't hold everything perfectly straight, and it's getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of likes versus someone that's, this is a composed image and someone thought about their composition and thought about their settings and thought about their lighting and didn't get as many likes. So there's definitely challenges with as many photographers are out there these days.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's interesting as you were talking about it being a crowded space, my mind immediately went to the idea that it's actually kind of small when you boil it down to, like if you distill it down to the people who have been doing it for a while and are producing quality work on a consistent basis and have grown a community around them, that's a very small community. I mean, we're talking 1,000 people, you know what I mean? It's
yeah, yep.
It's not that many really. And so, I mean, if it was a huge, crazy crowded space, I feel like my podcast would have millions of listeners. So
yeah, it's those levels, right? I totally totally get that, which I think is why it's so frustrating when those casual snapshot photos get so many likes, because you've got people that have dedicated tremendous amounts of time and years and work to get, and they don't quite get it. So I totally see that. It's like crowded at the bottom, and then as it gets up, there's fewer people. But yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and that part doesn't necessarily bother me because it always gives you something to aspire towards. But it is when you step back and you look at it objectively, none of it makes sense. And so I've just kind of, when it comes to that social media thing, my initial reaction is like, what the heck? But then I'm just like, just let it go. Just turn it off, go read a book or watch Stranger Things or something.
Yeah. I'm pretty good at letting it go and let it roll off, because at this point, like you said, some of the photos that get all those likes, it's like, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's going to sound bad, but my buddy Kane and I will just send them to each other just to get a good laugh out of it. You know, like,
yep.
Dude, you're not a very good photographer. Look at this one. You know, we both know that it's like,
right.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, I know exactly what you're saying. We've got the similar groups out here, and some of my West Virginia groups. It's like, man, yeah,
it's hard.
It is.
So one of the things that I think we have in common is that you've always described yourself as being a student. What keeps you engaged in the long pursuit of mastery, which in my opinion, there's really no such thing, and especially in the genre that we're in that can feel very saturated as we've been describing?
Yep. So I think it's a great question. I mean, landscape photography as a whole, the biggest core reasons it interests me is it's got a technical component, which is what my corporate career has been in, is technology and things like that. So I have a very technical brain that's worked for my corporate world. But I think that makes a person stale. You need some form of creativity, some way to be creative. And for me, that's why landscape photography is so great. Plus it Venn diagram of it gets me outdoors and into some really cool places, which is another element of interest of mine. But the technology and the creativity, I think, are the key drivers of why landscape photography for me is so attractive. And you're right. I totally feel like I'm always learning. I will never feel like I've mastered anything. I think the technical comes to me a little easier, but there are still technical conversations like on LPW that pops up that I'm like, man, that's like, I need to sit down and read some of this. Sometimes someone will drop something and I'm just like, whoa, I need to go read more about that or how that works and what that is. Because maybe I thought I understood something, but then when you start to really dig into it, there's always another layer to go, right? Yeah, I get why changing the setting does it, but do I really understand why changing that setting does it? So there's that element. And then from the creative side, that's where I really think there's just like, I have so much more to learn and do and figure out, anything from just composing interesting scenes, learning how to distill a scene down to something that's interesting, how to make sure my photos don't look like snapshots. That's a question I get asked. How do I make my photos not look like a snapshot?
Although apparently that's a good thing.
If you want the likes, right? Like if you want the likes, just get the snapshot, just step out of your car and do it. But there's just all of the learning and refinements to do that just keep me very engaged. And I very much like that approach. And it can even go, I do a lot of waterfalls because that's something that's close and accessible to me. And so I enjoy the sound of water, and I know it's cliche, but waterfalls is one of those things I will always photograph because I just enjoy the process and being there. Woodlands photography is something I've been trying to work on improving over the past couple of years. And, from hanging out with Michael, Caleb in the Smokies, Caleb McKinney, I've had some opportunities to try to improve that. But that's fun. That's engaging. It's like, I feel like I can go photograph a waterfall, and I still have room to work on my compositions there to keep them interesting. But, Woodlands is a whole different thing. It's completely different than photographing moving water. It's how do you take that chaos and distill it down into something that is interesting and not just you took a picture of some trees. That whole process, that very act of practicing it, I just, it's fun. It's something that's always something more to do. And like you said, I don't think you never master something. There's always improvement to be made. And, I think those improvements come slower as you get better, but they never stop. And to me, that's one of the things that just keeps me from getting burnt out and keeps me from, getting bored with it, because there's always something to do, either technical or the creative side. I've always got something to work on, improve, practice, and watch myself grow, hopefully, over time.
I love that. One of the things you said was about like learning how to compose a scene and, finding ways to improve on your compositions. And that's something that I know that I'm constantly trying to improve on myself. I'm curious for you because this is kind of the way I've been thinking because we talked about like visiting all these new locations and going wide instead of deep. Going into those new locations for you, does that help you kind of keep the learning side of it for you more interesting in terms of like showing up to a place like Death Valley for the very first time? For me, like I love that feeling of not knowing anything about that place and just trying to figure it out for the first time. But I'm curious for you, is that also kind of helping spur on your love for learning in photography?
Yeah, that ties into the camera as a key is it gets me to new places. And I enjoy seeing those places for the first time or seeing areas of a place for the first time, even if it's a place I've been to before, but exploring even deeper into areas. So, and that Death Valley is a great one because that first trip, I almost intentionally did not go do a ton of research. That was actually one of the meetups with the LPW group. So it was, I don't know, 6 or 7 of us all met out there. And I was like, I know some of those people knew Death Valley. So I knew I didn't have to look up anything because I would just tag along and follow them and they'd get me to cool places. But yeah, I mean, that was a whole part of the fun of the experience was just, I didn't go in with a lot of preconceived notions and it was just, wow, that's crazy. And, the first day, I didn't even know what Dante's View was when I went out there. So we hit Badwater Basin and everyone's like, oh, we're going to go up to Dante's View. And I'm like, okay. And, next thing it's like,
Let's
it
go.
all clicks and it's like, oh my gosh, we are like way above. And there's where we were like an hour and a half ago down there. And there's all those patterns down in the basin that, work really well for a longer lens. And it's like a kid in a candy store when you see those places and when you walk into it sort of unprepared like I was for that first trip, intentionally unprepared. But yeah, it was energy, it was excitement, it was experiencing new locations with just sort of fresh eyes. So yeah, definitely enjoy that part of it. And I do think that's an element of landscape photography that really keeps me going is that camera takes me to places that I might not have gone to otherwise because I wouldn't have had a reason to do it. But the camera gives me an excuse to go explore, see something a little different, or explore a place I've been to a little more deeply.
Yeah, definitely. That's how I feel about it as well. And I love that you said that you just go without a plan sometimes because I purposely do that a lot. Like if I know I'm doing a workshop somewhere and I've got a local guide that's going to take care of like getting us to the interesting spots, I purposely don't even look up what those spots are because I want the freshness for me to be infectious for the people that I'm teaching. Like, because it does rub off on people in terms of like, holy cow, you guys, do you see this thing over here? And like, oh my God, look at that. And people love that because you're feeding them ideas and it just makes the experience better for your guests, I feel like. But I wanted to ask you a question around the teaching side of photography. Since we both do so much of it, when you're out in the field teaching people, how do you balance the technical side of photography with the creative and emotional side without letting either dominate too much, either from a teaching perspective or even for your own photography?
That's a good question. Some of it, I think, is reading the people and trying to see what they're there. Well, let me back up one step. One thing I think is important is that energy that you alluded to. I think one thing I always ask for testimonials after workshops, and one of a common recurring theme is that I always get, you're very passionate about what you're doing.
Yes.
And I think if you start with that, like that energy, like you said, when you're excited about a place, the people around you can't help but be excited about a place. So I think that helps set everything on a good tone. If you show up at a place and you're excited or, and even if conditions are rough, like if you just, positive attitude, hey, we're going to see what happens here. This is exciting. This is what happens sometimes. This is what it goes. But a positive, excited, optimistic attitude, I think sets the base. And then that helps everything from there. And then from there, it's sort of reading the people. I think some people really want to focus in on that technical and that's what they want to do. What I'll do a lot of times is as a group, we'll cover some group basics. Maybe this location lends itself well to something moving water. We're photographing some streams. So let's talk about long exposures, what you're trying to do, watch those highlights in the water, season the flow to taste. I'm not here to tell you that your water should be crazy, milky, smooth, just like I'm not here to say it should get snapped. But what I do want you to know is how to do what you want to do. And here's the element you change. And we'll sort of do that as a group and talk over it. And then as we start to break up, I probably get more steps in a workshop than anyone because I'm running from person to person to person. And I always tell them, I'm going to come by. I'm going to say, hey, how are things going? And I said, you may be a person like me that wants to struggle with it for a little bit and you just assume me not be over your shoulder. You can say, I'm good. And I'll come back in 10, 15 minutes. I'll check again if you have something. But anyways, for those smaller individual, I think that's where, whether it's been the group talk was more about the composition, creative aspect of it, or the technical aspect, you can sort of course correct individually as you do those sort of individual visits. And if they're one of those technical people, then we can dive in on the technical. And most people understand how once they've done a couple outings with me, see, oh, okay, yeah, we'll dig on technical when he comes by individually. He's going to do a sort of group talk and vice versa. Maybe someone wants to know, hey, the snapshot example, I've had more advanced photographers that are pretty well technically capable, but they're trying to make their pictures just better. They're like, I know how to get a good exposure. I know what to do with water. I know how to stop motion and any of that, but I'm tired of my photos looking like snapshots. And then I'll dive in with them on a little more in depth on, well, here's how we do it. We be a little more deliberate. We move a little more. We try different things. We don't just pull our camera out, set it to chest height and take a picture of immediately what you see. You sort of have to work the scene. But that's sort of how I do it. It's sort of a summary overview to the group. And then I catch the individuals' focus as I sort of do the bounce from person to person to get their questions, and then we can dive deeper individually on what they want to do. And then sometimes they will say something like, oh, yeah, I should bring that up to the group at the next stop or before we leave here, talk about it. But that's sort of how I balance it. Do you have a hard time balancing? Because it is such a different thing, right? You've got what, 8 to 10 people on a workshop, and it's like, you might have 4 that want to do deep technical and 4 that want to do deep creative. How do you find yourself balancing it on those groups?
Yeah, very similarly for you, like kind of general overview in terms of subjects, things to think about at that location or the subjects that we're photographing, things to try out that are different, like you're describing, like maybe you should make sure you try to get low, look down, look up, don't just get, those kind of general things. Mm-hmm. And then like you, one of the things that I feel like I do pretty well is understanding that every single person is there for a different reason and is at a different place in their photography journey and might have totally unique questions that no one else cares about. Or maybe they're there to, like you said, get really technical. Let's dive into that. Or maybe they are wanting some tips on how to do something really abstract or deeply personal or expressive or whatever. And so I think getting to know each person on an individual basis and then trying to tailor your instruction to meet them where they're at while giving them something to aspire towards. I feel like that's kind of the sweet spot for me, is start with the big overview, get individual with each person, and then continually check in and hopefully find some people making some improvements over time.
Yep. That sounds very similar to my approach. Summary, dive in deep on the individual. And like you said, you sort of learn people as you go, right? Like by day 2, you're sort of like, okay, I sort of know what you want to do.
Bob's going to run off. He's going to go do this thing.
Right. Yeah.
And
you'll have to go find him somewhere.
Yeah. And he doesn't want your help. And Stacy, she's really into this kind of thing. So you need to make sure you ask her questions about how that's working. Oh, that person, like they're always overexposing every time. So like, make sure you look at their histogram, like constantly, like, yeah, exactly.
Yep. I know. Yep. Sounds very similar. Very similar.
But I think that's just being a good teacher, right?
I think it is. I think it is. I did technical training throughout my career at various points, and I that's another reason, all these Venn diagrams that overlap, but like that's another reason I enjoy the workshops is it's, I do enjoy teaching, and I think you're right. You got to tailor. It's like even teaching a classroom of kids. You do your group lesson to get the concepts out there, but you're going to know everyone learns different. Some want you to hover over their shoulder and help walk them through it until they're comfortable. Others want to struggle with it for a bit and then either figure it out, or now they've got a very pointed question to ask because they've struggled with it a bit. And it's at individual levels where you sort of tailor it to the individuals on the workshop from there.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten one where you just like got totally stuck? Like, man, I don't know how to help you at all.
I've been pretty lucky so far. I think you've had a lot more folks come through than I have. I build it in that I can go look stuff up. I always tell people I keep my phone with me, and I will tell people if I can't answer it right away, I will make a note and I'll come back to it.
That's the
And
right
I'll
answer.
actually come back with a list of things, and I'll tell them in the field rather than waste their time of me like trying to get it right. I'll tell them, I'm going to come back to this. I've put it here. You've seen me put it on my notes, and then I'll that evening go look something up or teach it to myself fast enough to like be able to explain it in a clear manner than it to be obvious that I'm not real sure how that works. So that's a good question. So, but I think I've been lucky, or I've just set expectations that buying that time to we're going to come back to that and we'll cover it, which I've done before.
Yeah. So
can't know everything.
So something that comes up a lot for you in the conversations I've heard you talk in your podcast is imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a concept that I think a lot of us struggle with when we're doing photography more and more, and like people are paying us money to help them with their photography, and you're looking around and you're like, me? Are you sure?
Right.
So how does it show up for you, both creatively and from a business perspective?
Creatively, it almost hits me harder creatively than I think it does from the business side. Creatively, I mean, man, it's like you said, there's a ton of photographers out there, but as you start to hang out and you start to move up, your peer set, your friend group starts to become really good photographers. I mean, I think about LPW, and that's sort of a niche community.
We've said LPW like 17 times.
True.
Landscape photographer worldwide Discord server.
Yes.
Just to say
so it's great. Yes, it's good to get that out there. I'm sure Matt will have a link in the show notes for it. But to me, that's like you've gone beyond typical Facebook groups and you're into a pretty niche community, and they can be intimidating in there because so many of those people in there are really good photographers. I mean, there's some people that hang out in there that are just really great photographers, and it could be intimidating. So that's where my imposter syndrome hits the most, is because which is good, right? You should always try to hang out with people that are making you better and moving good. I would probably have a bigger problem if I was hanging out in those social media groups and posting my snapshots and getting 1,000 likes. Then, I'm better off to be in something like LPW with that tier set. But that's where it really hits.
One of my favorite sayings is if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
For sure. And it can be hard to balance that, right? Because that's where I struggle. I feel like I get reasonable feedback on my photos. I have tons of room for improvement on them, I think, but that's where I have the biggest amount of imposter syndrome, is some of those communities that I hang out in and, talk with people about, and some of the people I follow on Instagram are just, it seems like they're always posting magnificent, amazing work. And I'm like, man, mine's not there. So you guys just have to sort of keep pushing forward. But that's where I really, really struggled. I think the most with imposter syndrome is just in the sharing of my own work. Yeah. On the business side, I feel like it's more, I don't know. I struggle with it less there. And I'm not 100% sure why. I mean, most of my attendees are beginners to intermediates, and I think that helps because, I don't know. The business side comes a little easier to me, and I feel like part of it is because I feel like my technical fundamentals are strong, so I feel pretty comfortable answering questions. When it gets to the creative side, I feel like even though I'm still working to grow and improve my own compositions and creativeness, I feel like that never ends, but yet I still have some value to offer people as they look at their own photos. I'm sure you can share your photo with somebody and get critique that's going to help you improve from there, but it's the imposter syndrome for my own personal creatives where I really struggle with it the most. The business side, for some reason, it flows a little more. And it's not to say I think I know everything. I just feel like I know enough to have the illusion of, being able to help people. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I'm very similar in that way. When I'm leading workshops, I don't have that feeling ever. I'm always like very confident. That just comes from experience, like you were describing, like 99% of the time, I'm able to answer the question in a way that I feel is adequate and competent and advanced enough for them to learn or get something from it. I feel like this is going to sound bad, but like the bar is relatively low in terms of like helping people learn photography.
Yeah.
And same as you when it comes to sharing my work and getting any recognition for my work. I'm always like, I don't know, maybe it's pretty
Yeah.
good, but like I'm not this person or that person yet.
Right.
But I don't think that ever goes away.
Yeah, I'm thinking not. In fact, we talked about the Shutter Nonsense podcast a little bit, but we had Alex Noriega on. We were talking about curating, and he was telling stories. And he's someone I look up to. Like, right, great, amazing photos, great work, and he was just telling a story of, someone was looking at his photos and they sort of swiped away, and it's like, everyone has that photographer that they see is a higher level than them, and I think even people that I look up to, they have a tier they look up to, and it's like it's turtle upon turtle upon turtle all the way up. That there's always someone that you think is better, and therefore it's tough.
Yeah, and I've tried really hard to banish those thoughts from my mind as much as I can, because I've always found that whenever those thoughts start to creep in, it just doesn't help me. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't really push me to become better. It just makes me try to emulate others or like do something that's not authentic to who I am as a person. And so I'm very self-aware that that's just a dangerous territory for me to go into. And so I'm like, oh, I'm going down that road again. Time to backtrack. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
yeah.
I haven't met that many people where that just doesn't happen to them, and I almost feel like if you've never felt that way before, like there might be something wrong with you.
I tend to agree with you. I think it's a natural feeling that we all struggle with, and if you don't struggle with it, then what's going on?
So you've been pretty honest about trying to build a photography ecosystem, right? You've got YouTube, you've got newsletters, podcasting, workshops, all the stuff. What's been harder than expected?
Balance has probably been the hardest to put it all together. When I first started it was easy, right? I'm going to do a YouTube channel, and I could focus on the YouTube channel. But then it's like, I need more than just YouTube. And YouTube was really, for me, it was less about YouTube being I'm going to be a YouTuber. It's more about YouTube was an opportunity to let people see how I taught. I want to lead workshops, and I've had people ask, well, how do you teach? I've got a YouTube channel. There's like 150 videos over there. Go check it out. If you like how I talk in those videos and how I approach it, we'll probably get along just fine on a workshop. If not, that was a great way for you to find out without spending any money, making any commitment, to find out our styles don't match, which is fine. That's, people's styles don't match.
Great.
So that was the YouTube aspect. But then it's, newsletters, everyone, you build your email list, which is true, because I don't really have a great list of YouTube subscribers per se. So if YouTube goes away, what do I have? So then it's the newsletter, and then you have to be consistent. So every other week I send an email newsletter, and I try to not make it sell what I'm selling, but provide some form of value, whether it be telling something about a trip I did, or how I sleep in the Forerunner, or how this trip went, or how I approach a waterfall. So you've got that. So now you've got two content making streams. Then the Shutter Nonsense podcast with Michael, that was another get out there, be in the community. I believe in creating content, but there's another thing where, we meet to record, and Michael does most of the heavy lifting on the editing, but I do a lot of the scheduling and the posts writing and stuff like that. So there's a whole other element of doing things. And in the workshops themselves, which has the whole world of, scouting for me, because I like to be familiar with an area. So I like to make multiple visits to an area first, make sure I understand it, see it in different light, different seasons, different weather, so that when I do take a group, I feel at least semi-competent initially of, okay, if something's not happening, we can do this instead, or vice versa. So anyways, long way of saying, they started out like pretty easy. I could focus on things, but now I sort of have 4 pillars of what I call my ecosystem, and trying to balance all of that with each other, paired with just time for my family, time for myself type situation. You throw that in, I was lucky my wife didn't kill me when I got back from Death Valley, because it was a bit much, for both how long I was gone, and the timing of that trip was not ideal because I misread the calendar. So
oh, you do that too, huh?
Oh, it was the worst. It was so bad. but that's what's been hard about it. I like what I'm doing. I feel good about, but the struggle, and it's not even so much the work itself. Obviously, there's times when I sit down to write the newsletter. It's like, okay, this is not what I necessarily really want to be doing, but to be consistent, I need to get it put out there. But that balance, finding that right balance, making sure I'm putting the time in where the gets the most value from. It's really easy to fall in the trap of doing things. You feel busy, you think it's contributing, but is it really contributing?
Yes.
Making sure you balance it. I think the newsletter is important, but how much time should the newsletter get? Should YouTube get more, or should workshop marketing get more? So those are where the challenges, I think, come in from that ecosystem I built. And I know you go through, because I think you have probably another 5 things on top of my list that you do on a regular basis to balance. And you always seem to be superhuman when it comes to work output. But I assume you have a very similar.
Oh man, as you were talking, I was resonating because I think yes, on the like, is this worth it? Is this effort? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Right? Because there's a lot of things that I do, including produce this podcast, where I'm like, is that worth my effort? Because I'm spending tons of time on it. And then there's this thing, and then there's that thing, and there's social media, and then there's like the NLPA stuff, and then there's social media, and then there's, you have this laundry list of things that you want to try to keep going. And it's really, really difficult to measure what actually is important for me.
Yep.
And I think the most frustrating thing for me is the fact that I am able to do all of these things at a fairly competently. And I don't feel like I've gotten that much out of it. That's going to sound really bad, but like, for the amount of effort I'm putting into all the different things that I've created and are keeping spinning and keeping going, I feel like I should be like a billionaire or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right, for as much work as you're putting in, right? I know what you mean, because sometimes it's hard to tie your successes to certain things you're working on, right? Even though there's probably a link in there somewhere.
Right.
But it's hard it's not always a direct, to use business terms, it's not always a direct conversion. So it's like, is the podcast worth it? Gut says probably, right? Like, get your name out there and does it. But can you tie specific dollar amounts to, like, it's a whole different game, and it's really tough.
And then you go back to the whole comparison thing, which is don't do it. But you kind of are forced to in some ways. Like, you see like influencers and content creators who are like driving $200,000 sprinter vans, and they're creating like just attention economy nonsense that probably takes up way less of their time and effort to create. But they've cracked this code, and they have this amazing, at least on the surface, this amazing lifestyle that they've created for themselves with way less effort. See, on the surface, seems like it's less, but maybe it's not. I don't know. Who knows? And then that's where it's just like, God, they're doing this, and they have all this, and I'm doing all this, and I have this, and it's that's the part that just kills me.
Super tough. Yes, it's super tough, that balance and figuring out what contributes and what doesn't, and it's hard.
And I don't know, I don't really have a good answer for that either.
I don't either. It's play as I go. I feel like my pillars are pretty strong. It's more of a balance of where should I be sticking the time amongst those pillars that I have currently. But I think it takes at least annual reevaluation, right? Like, what am I getting from this? But like I said, it's all compounded by tying conversions or tying certain revenue to certain things you're doing. It could be a combination of them, right? Like, it could be my YouTube channel and newsletter that drive certain things, but it's hard to really correlate exactly. So it's tough. It's tough.
I mean, a perfect example of this for me is like, for 2 years straight, probably 20 to 30 hours a week, I spent all of this time figuring out and cracking the code of search engine optimization so that I would rank highly for specific search terms that I thought would equate to print sales. And I rank number 1 in all these search terms that does generate a ton of traffic, but it's not converting to sales, and it's not. So it's like, what am I missing?
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Because now you've got the traffic. It's like, do you spend the more time to figure out the conversion piece of it? But, how much that's not going to be an insignificant task, right? It's going to take playing
Right.
with web pages and, trialing call to actions. And does this pop up? Does this text, does saying it this way work? Does it
Right.
this way work?
And you're going to
But
do that while you're doing all these other things too, right?
exactly. Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
pretty much on a daily basis when I'm home and not teaching workshops, I have this conflict of like, do you know that meme where there's the guy that's sweating and there's two buttons he can push?
Yes. Yep.
I have that. And it's like, work on the podcast or try to make more money selling prints or whatever. Like, because you can't really do both.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? When you're doing this stuff, something has to give somewhere. You have to put something on the side, even if it's temporarily, but you have to put it to the side for a little bit while you focus on something else to get it going, and then you have to make time to bring that other piece back potentially. Yeah, it's tough. I think that's the hardest thing of trying to do it is balance all of that, and then like we said, you throw your family on top of it, and before we start recording, just household things that need attention that unexpectedly on top of it type things.
Always.
Like, right? It's and just, yeah, it's
all right. So on the flip
good.
side, what parts of building that ecosystem for you have been surprisingly rewarding or energizing?
So it's been great to be part of the community. It's great and part of the community, but feel like I'm contributing to the community in some form or fashion. The YouTube channel, I genuinely try to put content out that I think people will be helpful, whether it be me talking about something, whether it be me talking about a piece of gear, because I get it. I do talk about gear, but people are looking for a new camera, and I try to give honest feedback on how something has worked for me or how it's worked over time, or try to talk people out of going to some new piece of gear because this works just fine. So I appreciate that. I appreciate feedback from workshops. I had a workshop, a more advanced photographer, but he, the testimonial wrote, hey, I got really good stuff about it. I don't know, 3-4 weeks later, he emailed me to say, hey, I did a local one-day workshop, and really it was your advice from the multi-day workshop that kept coming into my head as I worked through it that day. And he wanted to share his pictures from that other person's one-day workshop with me. That made me feel really good because it was a photographer who I knew his fundamentals, but still, even though he'd done my workshop, what I had said, what we had talked about on how to approach, he specifically came back to me to say, in this one-day workshop I did with someone else in my local area, it was your advice that kept coming through my head, and I wanted to share these photos. That just feels really good, similar to people replying to newsletters and things like that. So, like I said, I do feel like my pillars of this are good, and it's a growing thing. But what really keeps me going is I genuinely some of the comments I get, the thank yous, the emails, social media direct messages. I've got what I feel like online friends who I've never really met, but they've either consumed some of my content along the way, and I've started to know their wife through online. Like one of them, he got hurt in a bicycle accident, and like I was pretty early in the know list that this has happened and this sucks and how it affected his photography, and following along with his recovery. I get the messages. I just got a message from him yesterday. He was back out and it had stopped raining and he'd been able to get out, and he had a new Shimoto bag, and he was sharing pictures with me. So those are the things that I think are the rewarding parts from it. I mean, beyond just the monetary, trying to make money off of it, that's the stuff that's above and beyond, and the stuff that really contributes a lot and keeps me going and makes it all feel more worth it.
Yes, totally agree. I feel the same way. Everything you just said, the community is huge. Every once in a while, it doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while, you'll get somebody who somehow in some way, because of, I guess I'll just speak for myself, like because of my podcast and because she's been on 3 of my workshops, she wrote me this amazing letter about how I have impacted her life in a positive way. And like it almost moved me to tears. I mean, it was so amazing for that person to have expressed that much gratitude towards what I was doing. And how do you put a price tag on that, right? I mean, it's invaluable. It's amazing. Feels so good that you're having a positive impact on other people's lives. And then above and beyond that, I think something that we probably both would agree on is even though you're putting all this effort into something you're not sure about, at least you're putting effort into something that's yours, right? Like
Yes.
it's like you're not putting in effort to enrich the lives of some corporate shareholder or whatever. Like it's like
For
it's
sure.
you're enriching your life in terms of like becoming a better artist, improving your photography, making images that are personally meaningful to you. So I think all of that makes it worth it, right?
Yes. Yep. That building it piece is super important, right? All that effort. I mean, I've got enough corporate world experience to know exactly where you're going, right? Like so much of that is work to make someone else more money somewhere, or it's shoving virtual dollars and cents and places. But all of the stuff I've worked on is something I've built. It's mine. It's stuff I took it from scratch and made it. And it's still growing. Obviously, I want it to grow more. You know, we all want it to grow more, but it's something we've done for ourselves, and I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Well, I think we should end on the positive note with that. And last question is, who do you recommend for the podcast? Who are some people that we should get to know?
So I've got a couple here. First one is Garrett Hess. And I know he's been recommended. I forget who it was, but he's been recommended for you before, I think. But I actually met Garrett Garrett, he's out of Erie, Pennsylvania. So he's another one of those Midwesterner folks, right? And like if you go look at his work, it's just, again, it's a very good testament that you can make stuff happen in the Midwest. You can make what no one is going to think that Erie, Pennsylvania is a photography mecca, but he puts out some really great work.
He does. Super cool.
Yeah, super cool. I actually met him in West Virginia. One of the overlooked briefly. I was leading the workshop and he was up there too, and we just talked, but we ended up staying more in touch over Instagram and things like that. So we message back and forth frequently, and a lot of our circles travel. We both go to New River Gorge here and there, the same area, West Virginia. So we've got a lot of overlap in our circles, and so we keep in pretty good touch. But I think he'd be a great candidate for the podcast, just a good person. His work is really great, and I think it's helps get the Midwestern landscape photographer a little more representation. So he's a good one. He's on my list. I got two more. I've got Caleb McKinney. He's based out of Tennessee. First met him, LPW, essentially. But he's just the friendliest, most helpful person. When I was starting to scout the Smoky Mountains, he knows the Smoky Mountains really, really well. He's like, hey, I'll meet you out there. And so, man, he gave me like the whirlwind tour in a day of the Smokies. I swear we were all over that park, visiting different places, and he was just so sharing of his time. He knew what I was there for. I told him, I said, hey, I'm scouting. So I told him, I said, if you've got secret spots, either tell me don't take a workshop here or don't take me to them, whichever's fair. But he would point out stuff like we were visiting in the fall, and he would point me out to places like this place is good in the spring. So I could drop pins for springtime photos, even though I was in the fall. But beyond just him being super cool, I see him about every time I go to the Smokies now. But great work. Woodlands, wrote some really strong woodland stuff. He photographs, Smokies area. He travels to Colorado, Caddo Lake. So he's got lots of things in his portfolio. I really like his style. He's one of those people, I've been trying to improve my woodlands. It's like I tag along and like, what are you looking at? And,
what you got going on over there?
Right. It's great. When we were going through Cades Cove just this fall, just the things he'd stop, it's just, man, I might have driven past that. But because you're with someone and you take a moment and go. But so he's super cool, very sharing of his knowledge. And I think his work is really good. So I think he'd be a good one as well. And then my last one is Shanda Aiken, who I know you're very familiar with because she has a book, The Beauty of Durango, and you wrote the foreword to that one. But she's great.
True story.
Yeah. I met her. There was a small little photographers conference meetup out in Lone Pine back in early 2024, and she's one of the people out there and just super friendly. She was one of those. I was a little intimidated because I knew she had a book, and I'm like, oh, so friendly and just very easy to get along with, and just a cheerful, upbeat attitude. Her work is really good, and she's been doing what I think are a lot of cool things in the community. The Horizons photo conferences, she's been a key part of that. I like following along with what she's doing with art fairs and things like that. So I think she'd be interesting to hear from as well.
Awesome. Well, Jeffrey, this has been amazing and fun.
Yes. Thank you. It's been great being on. Hopefully people like the discussion. I've had a good time.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the episode. Conversations like this are exactly why I keep making this podcast. Before you jump into the next episode, I want to pause for a moment and thank everyone supporting the show over on Patreon. Your support is quite literally what keeps F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen alive. Hosting, production, editing, and all of the time that it takes to have these long, thoughtful conversations only works because people choose to support the show directly. If you've been listening for a while, if you've binged episodes on long drives, hikes, or late nights editing photos, please consider supporting the podcast on Patreon before moving on to the next one. Even a tiny contribution makes a real difference and helps ensure these conversations can continue. You'll find the Patreon link in the show notes or go to patreon.com/fstopandlisten. And to everyone already supporting the show, thank you. I truly couldn't do this without you. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.